Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And if you're listening to us on iTunes right now, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. We appreciate all the reviews you guys have left so far. Quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors, Cushy Dreams. They are my go-to for all things CBD related. Go to cushydreams.com. That's KUSHY dreams.com, and at the checkout use promo code CMP to get 20% off. Join the men and women who are sick of vapes and gummies and want to smoke their CBD. Quick shout out to our other sponsor is Drom. We all know dating apps are terrible. This is a new values-based dating app. You pick your deal breakers and deal makers. You don't have to be constantly swiping. Go to Drom.Date/CMP. Put that in your phone's browser. Click the iOS or Google button to install and use the invite code CMP to sign up. And if you're already matched up, tell your friends, your single friends, and get your partner to tell theirs. That's Drom.Date/CMP. Design and meet your perfect match. It's free to use. Okay. I'm so excited to have this guest on today. This is really very exciting. I went and saw him speak for the first time in November of 2020 at one of the rallies in DC, and I've just been a big fan ever since. He is the host of America First on Salem Radio and the Gorka Reality Check on Newsmax TV. Welcome to the podcast, Sebastian Gorka. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me, Chrissie.
I am so thrilled that you could be here. I know it's a famous quote, but there's like they might not remember what you said, but folks will remember how you made them feel. And I definitely remember how you felt. I in November of 2020, I started covering the Trump rallies in DC because I knew the mainstream media was not giving us, the people, a fair account of, not only the support that Trump had, but just everything about the way these rallies were covered. I knew was misconstrued. I knew we were being lied to. So I was like, I want to start covering these rallies, and I'm so glad I did. I heard you speak. I was moved, and I was very captivated. And I think back, I'm like, I don't remember what he said, but I was very moved by it. I'm reading your new book now, The War for America's Soul. And in this book, you talk about the forgotten working and middle class men and women who made Trump's victory possible. Democratic elites went from, calling them deplorable to having to sort of uncomfortably acknowledge them. But I felt they ultimately didn't want to, because I think truly acknowledging them kind of upends the status quo. Do you think that January 6th was sort of like the perfect bullet to put in the MAGA movement, or rather how January 6th was portrayed by the media?
Well, I think January 6th was a very problematic event because laws were broken, property was damaged, and things happened that were illegal. I think it was also tragic that an unarmed woman, an Air Force veteran of 14 years called Ashley Babbitt, was shot in the neck and killed by a police officer whose identity was kept secret for the last 8 months, which is very, very peculiar. So at the end of the day, I thought it was very, very damaging to the America First MAGA brand until Nancy Pelosi, and I mean, this myth of her being the arch strategist is so bogus, until she decided to use that event for the second impeachment of President Trump after he left office, which is quite stunning. You're meant to impeach somebody to remove them from office. You can't impeach somebody like me, who's not the president, never was the president. And she tried after the Russia hoax and the first impeachment to do it again. At that point, people realized the Democrats don't give a damn about the truth. This is about criminalizing conservatism. And we've seen that in the last 7 months. We've seen grandmothers arrested and put in solitary on the charge of what? trespassing. Nobody was arrested and put in solitary for the scads of violence of the last year and a half from BLM and Antifa that resulted in the deaths of more than 36 Americans, including Black Americans like David Dorn. So no, it was a dark moment. It was a very dangerous moment for the MAGA movement, but that changed when Nancy went crazy. And to be clear on your prior point regarding the working class, let's be a little bit more specific. I said this when I served in the White House for President Trump. I've said it since I left the White House. It's not just the Democrats. The issue is the betrayal of Americans, especially working class Americans, from both sides of the aisle. The Republican Party machinery, the establishment, the rhino class, betrayed them as much as the Democrats ever did. And I love being, the American with the funny accent, the legal immigrant who has to remind my fellow Americans, guys, do you know what happened in 2016? Because it truly was historic. When my buddy and former colleague, General Flynn, calls it a peaceful revolution, he nailed it. Why? Well, just open a bloody history book. Every single president, from Washington to Obama, was a member of the swamp. Every single one of them was a politician or former general. From Washington to Obama, they were former congressmen, senators, governors, or retired generals. Every one. Well, guess what we did in 2016? More than 60 million Americans said, enough of it. Enough of the stinking swamp. We want somebody who's never been a politician, never been a member of the swamp. And for the first time in the Republic's history, we elected somebody who'd never even run for political office before. I mean, that's stunning. Donald Trump became president the first time he ran for any political office, and that's what's revolutionary. And I think that's changed politics forever. It's not about the parties anymore, Chrissy. It's about representing Americans and the interests of our nation.
Do you think the fact that Trump won in 2016, despite efforts to thwart him, do you think that kind of not scared the establishment, but
Oh, it did. No, that's the right use of the word. I mean, look, let's be very clear. We were outspent by one of the most corrupt politicians in American history by a factor of 2. The official figures are $1.3, $1.4 billion that Hillary spent. That's more than twice the money we had, and we still won. And this, remember, I've saved it. I love to tweet it out every now and again. We were told by the New York Times a month before the election, it's a slam dunk, 90% Hillary. Mm-hmm. On the day of the election, the Huffington Post tweeted it out. It is delicious that Hillary Clinton has a 94, 95% chance of winning. And my old boss has got, a 1%, 2% chance of winning. They believe that because of her gender, because of, what sex she is, and because of her last name, she had to be the president. And then in comes this guy who's never run before, and he wins. And the reason, you said scared, they are petrified, especially of him running again. Why? Because nobody owns my old boss. Nobody owns him. This is a man who was rich beyond anybody's wildest dreams before he ran for office. He's not like Nancy Pelosi, who becomes a multi-millionaire on a salary of $160,000. How do you do that in DC? And nobody owns him, not the unions, not oil, not big pharma. Nobody owns him, and that's why he had to be destroyed, and that's why they are still very, very scared of him with good reason, because he is the one man who can drain the swamp.
That's what really what Trump did for me. And I was kind of slow to get on board with him. I didn't vote for him in 2016. I was like kind of coming out of my feminist brainwashing and voted for Jill Stein for some reason. But then came around and voted for him in 2020. And I will say that is the one thing he did for me personally, was really crack open my view of the media. And now looking back, I realized they were telling all of us Hillary's going to win. Hillary's going to win. And it makes you see everything in a different light. Like, wow, the media just points you where they want you to go. They tell you what to see and how to feel about it. And just the American people, I mean, maybe I was slow to it. Maybe a lot of American people were already fed up with the media. But for me, he really revolutionized the way I see all media, and ultimately taught me to really think for myself even more.
Yeah, one of the great, as you know, if that unbiased history books are ever written about this period, one of the greatest things that all Americans of any political identity will have to be massively grateful for is what President Trump did in terms of revealing the media for who they are, just how massively corrupt an institution the mainstream legacy media has become. Let's be clear. Let's look at the last 4 years. The media, day in, day out, peddled propaganda. We now know it. There's been an indictment of one of Hillary's lawyers last Friday. He's been charged with lying to the FBI. The Steele dossier, the dodgy dossier, was opposition research paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign. Lies about President Trump, Russian hotels, hookers, the KGB, Putin. And it was peddled. That if you read the Steele dossier, you have to laugh because it's just sophomoric garbage. And then you realize this crap was picked up wholesale and peddled by the Rachel Maddows, the Don Lemons, the Anderson Coopers for 4 years, non-stop. The former CIA director, John Brennan, for Obama, who voted for the Communist Party before he joined the CIA, called President Trump a traitor on live television. And what happens? $40 million, 500 affidavits, hundreds of interviews. Mueller's, almost 2-year-long investigation gets zipped, squanzoli, nothing in terms of any proof on a man who was tougher against the Russians than anybody since Reagan. And what happened? Chrissy, can you tell me in the last 8 months, has anybody in the mainstream media said, oops,
No.
Sorry, we were wrong.
You'll never hear that.
No,
Yeah.
no, and they're just moving on to the next thing. I mean, this is how moral. And look, I don't. This show isn't about me, but you've read my book. I thought I was adequately cynical to serve in public office. My father, my parents as children suffered under Nazi occupation in Hungary. Then my father was persecuted by the communists that replaced the fascists. He was arrested, tortured at the age of 20, given a life sentence. So I thought, what can DC do to me? I'm fine. So I became a deputy assistant to the president. I became his strategist. But I wasn't ready. I really didn't realize the depths of depravity, the moral turpitude of these people. And I understood the attacks on me. I get it. I'm a surrogate for the president. You're going to attack me day in, day out. But when they attack my wife in the mainstream media, when one stinking fetid journalist in a couple of months wrote 53 hit pieces on me, and then you realize when one of them writes an attack on my high school age 18-year-old son, and in the title uses the word traitor to talk about a kid who's 18 years old, then you realize these people are the scum of the earth. They don't get to call themselves journalists. They are shills. They are propagandists. They are the outreach arm, the informational warfare arm of the DNC. So yeah, this is as my book says, this is a war for America's soul with people who hate America.
Mm-hmm. I really do recommend this book because even though this was written pre-2020 election, pre-pandemic, it gives a lot of really good, it explains a lot of what is going on, and it puts a lot into perspective because especially if you're kind of newly red-pilled or newly kind of awake to the truth of how government works and the media, it gives a lot of really, I think, important context. And of course, if anybody reads your Wikipedia or anything the mainstream media will read about, oh, he's fringe, oh, he's a spy, and it all kind of makes sense. It's like
let me comment on that because I have to give full credit. And yeah, Wikipedia is garbage too. So there's a very accomplished journalist, one of the last few true investigative journalists. He's written amazing books on Bin Laden and other topics. His name is Rich Miniter. And he gave an interview when I was in the White House to some mainstream media. And they said, you're friends with said Gorka. Well, how do you respond to those who say, he's fringe, he's extreme? And Rich, in his classic style, probably, over the smoke of a large cigar, said, which one of the people is in the White House as deputy to the president? Is it the quote unquote journalist, or is it the person he is calling fringe? You can't be fringe if you're working in the West Wing. And this is just how distorted the bizarro world is that these quote unquote journalists have created.
Oh yeah, people call me fringe. I'm like, I tell jokes. Relax. Like, why are we spending time taking out a comedian? I want to know, who do you think is the most?
Sorry, let me don't forget your question, but let's talk fringe. Here's a little anecdote from second week in the White House. So there's a team of bookers, lovely ladies, who would book members of the administration to do media interviews. And, they're trying to manage, hundreds of requests every single day for different members of the cabinet and deputies like myself. And so they have to prioritize them, which news channel gets first bite on an issue. And I went into their office in the EEOB in the Eisenhower building, just across from the West Wing, to manage my requests for the first 2 weeks. And I walk in there, and there was this whiteboard on the back wall, and it had all the big shows, Tucker, Hannity, Maddow, all down the list, with figures behind them. And I looked at those numbers, and they were viewing figures. So how many people watched each show? Because that's how they prioritize it. If this show has less views than that show, well, they're not on the top of the list for interviews with members of the administration. And I looked at the numbers, and I said to the booker, how many zeros have you taken off those numbers? What's the real figures? And she said, no. Those are the Nielsen audience figures for those cable TV shows. And I looked at it again, because I had no idea. I mean, I'd been on media, but I wasn't analyzing size of the shows I went on. I said, are you kidding? That's when I realized. So I don't know if you know this. The most popular show in America is Tucker's, okay? On a good night, when he does something really big, he interviews President Trump or whatever, his maximal audience is 5 million people, okay? We have 320 million in America. On an average night, on a good night, he's doing 4 million. Do you know how many people watch CNN?
Like, I don't know, less than a million?
Yes. So when we were in the White House, when we boosted their figures because President Trump was, their wanted figure number one, the best night for those sad cases like Anderson Cooper was 700,000. 700. I've got a radio show that's just 3 years old, less than 3 years old. I've got 3 million listeners for 3 hours every day. So why do we even talk about these people? Rachel Maddow, the same thing. Significantly less than a million. And here's the good thing. CNN, since President Trump sadly left office, has lost more than 40% of its viewership because it's Russia, 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 but he's gone. So what are we going to talk about? So, we need to talk about how morally corrupt they are. But at the same time, Chrissie, we have to understand nobody's stinking watching them.
It's sad. It's they couldn't wait for him to get out. Oh, things are going to calm down now. Things are going to be back to normal, and they're obsessed and they can't let him go. I wonder, Seb, who do you think is the most evil person working in the government right now?
Oh my gosh!
If you could pick one,
oh my gosh!
I should ask you. Give me a top 10 now.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you who it is. They're all soulless. I mean, cackling Kamala. We've had 13 servicemen and women murdered in Kabul. She gets off the plane in Vietnam or wherever she is, and a reporter asks a question, and she starts laughing. I mean, sorry, that's just perverse. I mean, that woman. Biden, likewise, talking about the surrender of Kabul, the most significant strategic defeat since, Vietnam, and he says at his speech, it was the best decision. It was the right decision. These people are evil. But you know who's the worst of them all? It's the Secretary of Homeland Security. So Alejandro Mayorkas, lies every day. He did it yesterday. He said, the border is not open. hang on. I just
Yeah,
showed
okay.
the footage. I just showed the footage. 10,000 Haitians in Del Rio, another 15,000 under the bridge, but the border's not open. Okay, but here's why he's the most heinous. When the people of Cuba decide to fight, to go on the streets, to say no to the regime, and wave our flags. You can go to prison for owning an American flag in Havana.
Wow.
And they're waving our flags, shouting libertad, libertad, wanting their freedom from this communist regime. And Mayorkas goes on television 2 days later and says, don't you dare think of coming to America if you're in Cuba. Don't you dare think of getting on a raft and coming here so you can have your libertad. You know why that's evil? Because Alejandro Mayorkas came to America as a refugee from Cuba in the arms of his parents as a child. So it's okay for him, and it's okay for the 6,000 Mexicans and Haitians and Haiti, refugees to come across, quote unquote, refugees to stream across the border. But Cuba, that is actually a communist regime that he escaped from, no, you stay in that stinking hellhole. That makes Mayorkas the most evil person in the administration.
And it seems like, yourself, your parents and yourself, came through, and it seems like you have a greater respect for the process of coming to this country.
Yeah, look, I got in line. I paid my money. I waited, and I took a test. It wasn't a COVID test. We didn't have COVID back in 2012, but I took a test to become an American citizen. And the idea that now, just because they want a voting base, just because they want to win every election in perpetuity and create a one-party state, now you can just jump ahead of people who waited and waited and waited. That shows you the utter disrespect. And of course, here's an additional hypocrisy, rank hypocrisy. What do the Democrats say they're about? Women,
equality,
minorities, equity, looking after the small guy. Guess who is going to be endangered the most by illegal migration? It's not me. My job isn't going to be radio hosts aren't rapidly replaced by legal immigrants who can't speak English, okay? Guess who hurts the most? It's minority communities, recent legal immigrants, the indigenous, Hispanic, Black American community who are just at the bottom of the career ladder, working for tips in restaurants. And in comes an illegal alien, says to the owner, hey, I'll work for cash. I'll do it for half of what, Tony's doing it for. And then who are you hurting the most? Not me, not you. You're hurting Americans, ethnic minorities who are trying to live the American dream. They don't care a damn. They're thinking about votes, and building a larger political plantation. Candace Owens nailed it. The Democrats who actually were the slaveholders, the Democrats who created the KKK, the Democrats who started the Civil War and assassinated Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, they may have got rid of their cotton plantations, but they now have a political plantation of government dependency, and they want as many Blacks, as many Hispanics on that political plantation. It's time for our fellow Americans from the ethnic minorities to wake up and emancipate yourselves.
Yeah, and especially, just from looking in Texas alone, without knowing anything about it, it's like, looks like they're trying to turn Texas purple. Looks like they're trying to turn it blue. And you hear things like, oh, they're shipping off these illegal immigrants into special counties specifically for that reason of turning them purple or even blue, and it's very scary to see. And then we have so much hypocrisy, coming from our government leaders about masking. Just recently, the mayor of San Francisco, London Breed, It's kind of unbelievable, and I don't, at this point, it seems like they don't care how they look, and they sort of, when they're questioned about it, when they're caught, they sort of come off indignant. I'm going to play a really small clip from London Breed when she was questioned about why she was not wearing a mask indoors.
And I think it's sad that this is even a story. The fact is, there was something that was really monumental that occurred, and that is Tony, the original members, the brothers, Raphael Sadiq and Dwayne Wiggins, who have not performed in public for, I believe, at least over 20 years. They are just really some of the most incredible artists in the history of this country and the Bay Area in particular. And the fact that that is getting lost here is very unfortunate, not to mention the incredible trumpeter, Maurice Mo Better Brown.
Oh my God. So she goes on and on. She's caught not wearing a mask. And I watched the footage of her. It's not that she's just at her table or she's just getting up for a second or she looks like she just finished her meal. She straight up was up dancing in the crowd. And when questioned about it, she's like, this is Tony. This is like a reunion tour. This is a long, 6-minute clip, but she goes on to making it about how we need to support nightlife and how dare it be about her.
Look, you're in danger, Chrissie. I mean, seriously, that level of comedy, that is a danger to your career.
She's gonna take my job.
Right. She's standing up saying, hey, they hadn't played in a band for 20 years. So COVID magically disappears because COVID is afraid of the band reunion or something. It's like the Met Gala.
Mm.
I mean, seriously, it's like the Emmys. Everybody inside the tent had no masks on, except who? Except the Black Hispanic people serving the champagne and the hors d'oeuvres. I mean, what does that tell you? I mean, just what Hollywood is liberalism. And what does it say? Oh, the serfs can be masked, but we are immune from COVID. As children, one of the most viral videos I put on my Twitter a couple of days ago is this. And I think it's pre-K. This tiny kid, and in comes the Nazi quote unquote teacher or whatever, and he's pulling the mask off, he's crying, he's tearing, and she's just forcing that mask back on that child. I mean, it's fascistic. And on top of that, who are the science deniers? Listen, your viewers need to know this. I walk my dogs every morning past a massive playground, and it breaks my heart every morning when I see those parents, young parents, fit parents, holding the hands of their little toddlers, and the little toddler is masked. And I just feel, I mean, one day I might have to say, excuse me, do you know the scientific data for COVID in children? I'm just curious to see what their response is, because I've posted on my Twitter feed from the CDC. The fact is, if you are under the age of 16, your chances of dying from COVID aren't 5%, aren't 1%, aren't 0.5%. According to the national data, a child's mortality rate from COVID is less than the seasonal flu. It is 0.05%. So what the hell are you doing? It's mind-blowing.
It seems like it takes only one like very brainwashed person per family to have an effect on everyone.
Yes.
Because what I've heard from a lot of folks that they'll sort of pressure their parents into getting, well, you can't see your grandson unless you get it. And I know this comes from a place of fear, but again, like you said, look at the science, look at the statistics. Maybe some people are mistaken in thinking that they don't want their little toddler to give it to their grandparent. But again, like where are the stats on this?
Can we just stop? You don't even need stats. Look at health policy. Fauci has said no masks, double masks. So where's the science there? And then on top of this, what the hell do you think's happening in a restaurant or a plane? You're on a plane and you're wearing a mask, and 26 times the stewardess says, I'm sorry, but these are the regulations, and you'll be escorted off the plane if you don't. And then what do humans think happens when you drink or eat and you are permitted to take off your... What do you think happens in a restaurant when they say you can take your mask off to eat? Do you think COVID just kind of stops and like hovers in the air because you've taken your mask off and you're eating? Are you a cretin? Are you a moron? Do you actually think COVID knows not to go up your nose when you are drinking that warm glass of Coke on the plane?
COVID is so polite. It just
it's
waits.
so polite. I mean, it's just so polite.
Yeah.
It's, oops, I can't infect you now because you're eating that stupid little dried up biscuit the stewardess gave you. Guys, wake up. Stop living in fear, please.
What would you say to Americans who truly feel hopeless? They see footage of their leaders and governors and our celebrities doing whatever they please. Really, at this point, it seems like they don't care at all how they look. What do you say to Americans who feel like, well, I still have to obey the rules? To me, I'm starting to feel like, no, you don't, because
do not comply. Do not comply. I refuse to wear a mask. People call me out all the time, and I just say two things. Hey, does your mask work? And that kind of stumps them. Like, if your mask works, then you worry about yourself, not me. And then the second one is if they get really crappy, it's like abortion. My body, my choice. So those are my tools to deal with the brainwashed sheep. And when it comes to your broader attitude, you mustn't be intimidated. Look at the last 4 years. For the last four years under President Trump, his team, me, anybody who worked for him, anybody who voted for him, we were called misogynists and Islamophobes. Then it moved to nationalists. Then it moved to white supremacists. And then finally, totally denuding the word of any meaningful value, they called us all Nazis. Me, the child of people who suffered under fascist dictatorship, we were called the Nazis. Legal immigrants to the United States, the president who's married to an immigrant, they were called Nazis. For 4 years, incessantly. What happened? Wow. 11 million more people voted for President Trump than did in 2016 after 4 years of being called a racist, a Nazi, and Islamophobe. And he had the largest proportion of Black and Hispanic support since the 1960s for a Republican president. So here's my message to all of your viewers. You're not alone. There's another 73 million of us out there. And if you care about this country, if you love this country, first things first, never, ever censor yourself. Whether it's on Twitter, whether it's at the barbecue, whether it's at the water cooler, never, ever catch yourself about to say something you believe and then swallowing it or not posting it. Let me tell you a story. So a few months ago, my wife and I were invited to speak at the golf course in Virginia, the Trump golf course. And this wasn't a GOP event. This wasn't, crusty Republicans. This was the Conservative Women's Association of the county. And it was a wonderful event. It's a beautiful golf course. I don't play golf, but it's a beautiful location. And I walked into the ballroom, and this woman immediately walks up to me, lovely ball gown, and says, "Hey, Dr. G, big fan. Can I get a selfie?" And of course, I said, "Sure." And we took a photograph. And I said to her what I say to everyone who comes up to me and asks for a photograph: don't forget to tag me when you post it. And then suddenly her expression changes, and she said, "I can't do that. I mean, it's a real Democrat county around here, and my husband is self-employed, and we have a business, and we can't do that."
Boy.
At that moment,
then why take the picture with you?
Yeah, something died in my heart. A little bit of me died, and I didn't say anything to her. But when I gave my speech about an hour later, I told the story, and I said very simply, if you're not prepared to put your name to the values you say you hold, I'm a conservative, then you don't deserve to live in America. Why? Because if this phrase came to me as I was speaking, if you're not prepared to fight, you don't deserve to win. So never, ever censor yourself anywhere. Stand up for the truth. If you love America, if you want America to be free for your children, your grandchildren, get engaged. And this is a lesson we have to learn from the left. The left is very smart. George Soros, everybody else. It's not necessarily about big politics. It's about local politics. Look at what's happening at the school boards. This awakening of America. Parents saying, CRT, critical race theory, that's bigoted. To say somebody's skin color actually means whether they'll be a success or a victim, or whether they should vote Democrat or whether they should vote Republican. That's racism. And they're pushing back. So the greatest thing you can do is not be a national radio host or work in the White House. Run for local office. Run for the school board or support somebody who is running, because we can make this the freest nation on God's earth again if we take it back one school board at a time, Chrissie.
You don't think it's too late? That's good.
No,
That's
not at
encouraging.
all. No, not at all. Remember, look, in 1776, Americans did something quite amazing. So we stood up to the biggest, most powerful nation, biggest, most powerful empire the world had ever seen. So the British Empire, literally, the sun didn't set on the British Empire. From the British Isles to India, it was the biggest, most powerful empire the world had ever seen. A bunch of crazy colonials said, we want our freedom. And do you know how many people fought the British? Until recently, they said maybe 3%. Recent data shows it's more like between 1 and 1.5%
wow.
of Americans actually fought the greatest empire the world had ever seen and defeated it. Now, I don't want a civil war. God forfend us from a civil war. But when it comes to political engagement, we, the good guys, will win. Why? The crazies, the CRTs, the BLMs, the Antifa, they're a tiny fraction of America. It's just that they're the loudest.
They're very loud.
And now it's time for us. No more silent majority, guys. We need to be the noisy, the loud majority.
Yeah, I sometimes get frustrated. A lot of folks feel like, oh, somebody else will fight. Oh, well, I don't want to put myself, I don't want to be seen liking or retweeting this. Oh, I don't want to go out in front of the school board because then I got so upset with my sister who's a teacher in Vegas. She's like, I don't want to go up in front of the school board. Then they'll know where I work. And I don't know. It just, I sent her your book. So she's
good. Thank you. God bless you.
I liked it so much because it put into context, the sort of trend of social justice replacing the rule of law, which I think was important to know the history of, and also kind of how tolerance morphed into kind of another form of bullying, or I think you called it in your book like partisan tolerance, and
that's chapter 3 that was inspired by the great Andrew Breitbart. So read The War for America's Soul, but there's a life-changing book that made me write my book, and that's the late Andrew Breitbart's Righteous Indignation. And in it, in chapter 6, he lays it all out. The left had a plan. This isn't Obama. This is the last 90 years, from Antonio Gramsci to Marcuse to Adorno to Saul Alinsky to Hillary to Obama. This is a plan, and we need to understand it. And let's boil it down to one thing. And this is the thing that so motivated Andrew, and God bless his soul, and we dearly miss him. What we are fighting against is bullies. These people are just bullies. Whether it's masks, whether it's mandatory vaccinations, whether it's keeping Black Americans on the government dole of the handout of the political plantation, it's just bullies. And we need to push back. And the only way you deal with a bully is you call them out for their bullying. So if you think bullies are bad, guess what? You have a role to play in taking back America.
Yeah. And really, it's just like you said, whether it's in a backyard barbecue or whether you are on Twitter and have a huge platform or another social media Don't stay quiet. I wanted to address this question from the fans. Trust in the elections has seriously eroded. What steps could be taken to restore faith in those institutions? And do you think any such steps will be implemented?
Again, look in the mirror. What have you done? What have your viewers done to make sure elections aren't stolen in America? My wife is a volunteer and a poll watcher. Have you done that? Here's a shocking statistic from my friend Raheem Kassam of the National Pulse. Kind of blew my mind when I heard it. So everybody bitches and moans about the GOP this, the GOP that. More than 50% of the local positions in the Republican Party, at county level, are empty. Empty. So if you want to take back America, guess what? How about you volunteer? And I don't mean the tough ones like precinct captain, just local volunteers. If we become the Republican Party, we take back America and we can defeat the Democrats. So look in the mirror. What are you doing to save America? If you do something, we can win.
So other than working at polls, what are some other ways that, ordinary folks who feel like they don't know how they can help, what else they could probably do?
School board. You got to run for school board. If you don't run, you got to support somebody that is running. Local politics is the key. Get engaged, volunteer, be part of the solution. Don't just listen to talk radio. Don't just listen to your favorite podcast. Don't bitch and moan. Get engaged. Be part of the solution. Because if you're not actively part of the solution, I got news for you. You are part of the problem. You are part of the roadblock. So ask yourself, every morning, I'm a Catholic. I believe that, we are created in the image of our God. And every morning I ask myself, what can I do for God? At the end of the day, I ask myself, did I achieve something? Did I do anything to the glory of God? How about you do this as well? You don't have to be a believer. We are a Judeo-Christian nation. So guys, look at your history. Our founding fathers weren't deists. That's garbage. They were actually Christians. Ask yourself another question every morning. What am I going to do to help America be America? And at the end of the day, when you say your prayers, when you go to bed, ask yourself, did I do enough to make America safe again for my children, for myself, for my girlfriend, for my grandchildren? Do a little bit. And it can be simply reposting you, retweeting me, being a voice. I mean, your sister, oh my gosh, another tragic story. She's afraid people will know where she works. Then how the hell do you think you're going to save America? You're not. Yeah. If that's your attitude, put your name to your values. Why? Here's one reason alone. When you put that yard sign out for President Trump next year, when you put that post and somebody sees it, your neighbor, your relative, who didn't have the courage and says, oh my gosh, Chrissie said what? Seb said what? I'm not alone. I agree with her. You can be the catalyst for 10 people, for 100 people. Show the way. Don't be the sheep, be the shepherd. Every single one of us, every single person listening has a role to play.
It's so true. And I really do believe that we do have God on our side. And before I was as outspoken about this and even voting for Trump, everything, I found more and more people were in my DMs, more and more people were in my messages, and the media really does want us all to feel very alone, and that we're the small minority, and that we're every other horrible name you can think of, insults. But I think we need to just join together, and there is no voice that is too small, or no act that is, meaningless.
Absolutely. It's up to you guys. It's up to all of us. You can be a part of the solution. You can be part of bringing America back. And all politics is local. And here's one last thing. I get this a lot. Well, I don't want to be political. I don't want to be political. Hey, guys, wake up. They made everything political. Mm-hmm. Where you go to eat, whether you're wearing a mask or not, whether you have a job because you're not vaccinated, it's all political. They started it. You do not have a choice right now not to be political. Hopefully in the future we can get back to business and things cool down a little bit. But everything is political, from playgrounds to restaurants. So the idea that you can insulate yourself and be apolitical, not happening. So be part of the solution.
Absolutely, yeah. And the forces that are at work want us divided up into as many groups as possible. So just keep talking to one another. Sebastian, I really appreciate your time this morning. I know you have to run off to another interview. Is there anything else you wanted to mention? Anything coming up? New books, projects?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of things, but please check out the TV show every Sunday on Newsmax, 7 p.m. Eastern and 10 p.m. Eastern. It's called the Gorka Reality Check. You can watch it for free. Just download the Newsmax app. Everything to do with me is up on my website, sebgorka.com. That's SEBGORKA, sebgorka.com. And the latest book is The War for America's Soul. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. Follow me, except YouTube that has canceled me twice because they're a bunch of fascists. And I think we have to thank, don't we have to thank the guy that brought us together, Chrissie?
Yes, Chris Coles.
Yes, Mr.
Reagan.
Love Mr. Reagan. He's another, perfect example. Working in Hollywood as a writer and actor. And he says, this is nuts, okay? And he said, I'm going to risk it all. And then he becomes this amazing YouTuber. So follow Mr. Reagan, Mr. Reagan USA on Twitter as well. A great YouTuber. And thank you, Chris, for bringing us together with Chrissie.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Sebastian.
God bless you and your viewers. Thanks, Chrissie.
Thanks, guys. Bye.